My name's Guy Kestivan, and today I'm doing the tech talk around on the Liteville 301 CE Mark 1. So Liteville, if you've not heard of them before, super high-end German producer of alloy mountain bikes for a very long time. Incredible reputation for attention to detail, which is what we'll be drilling down into mostly on this tech review. But there are two very significant things about this bike. For a start, it's Liteville's first e-bike, and it's also their first bike with a carbon frame. So it's still this trademark anodized aluminium back end, you know, with these massive welds and these big hard anodized rear stays, and you've got all this really nice detailing in here. You know, you've got the Syntace rear axle, Syntace rear mech protector, because Liteville and Syntace are essentially the same company. Syntace is the component arm of Liteville. Liteville is the bike arm of Syntace. But up front, you've got this fully monocoque, unidirectional carbon fibre frame, you know, really kind of stealthy, matte finish there. I mean, you can see a bit of the weave coming through on the top tube there, but otherwise, this is a big piece of super stiff, super strong carbon fibre. You know, they certainly haven't chosen carbon fibre to make this a lightweight bike. It's 24.5 kilos, so it's hefty, you know, relatively hefty even by e-bike standards, but it is super strong and super stiff, as you'll see from the live ride video. While we're here, let's talk about this linkage. This is very much a Liteville trademark piece. This 4-pivot, it's a 160mm travel setup on here, and the linkage actually comes up above the top tube, and this is equipped with a RockShox Super Deluxe coil shock, but that is not the standard RockShox coil. That is a specific Liteville 33% progressive coil, because it's a very linear system, so so they've added that progressive coil in there to stop the shock bottoming out so easily. Still very fluid, still a very sensitive setup, but that keeps it from blowing through the travel too much. Just keeps that rear end super connected and super grippy. Again, something you will see from the live ride review. And the other thing, sorry, there's a lot, I keep adding very distinctive things about this bike because there's a lot going on here. I mean, obviously, mullet bikes aren't unique. You know, Canyon, another German brand, do their e-bike is a mullet, and the 301 can be run with 27.5, as you can see here, or 29. It's got two pieces, but I've been running it. I've got the 29er wheel. I just never got around to fitting it, I'm afraid. Mainly because I just love the way this massive eddy current 27.5 2.8 Schwalbe tyre on the back with these massive motocross knobs on it and the extra flotation and the way it just slides rather than bites like the front. So it's just, even when you're on the ragged edge, you know it's the back end that's going to break away, and it takes a hell of a lot to make it break away. I mean, this is a proper bar end scrubbing bike because it's so low. Again, I'll cover the geometry off in a second, but the mullet back end just makes this an absolute beast. But you have got the ability to run a 29er both ends setup. So at the front, you have got 29er with a Magic Mary, and as you'd hope, it's, you know, both tyres, Evo, Apex, tubeless spec in Addix soft compound. So maximum control rubber front and rear. You've got a massive 200mm rotor on the front, 180 on the back, XT 4-pot brakes from Shimano, and it's a full Shimano drive chain as well. So you've got 1051 cassette on there, so super wide ratio, and the XT mech is slightly protected by that little tab there. And as I say, Liteville and Syntace are very closely connected, so it's got Syntace W33 I-wheel on the back. Syntace are one of the first brands to pioneer wide rims, and their wheels have got a superb reputation. So really nicely machined hubs here. You can see these little straight pull flanges on them, and you've actually got torque caps on there for once, which is, you know, pretty rare fitment, but they sync perfectly with these Lyric forks. I mean, I think this is, I mean, look, pulling back here, that Lyric actually looks tiny on this bike. I mean, it kind of gives you an idea of the scale of this, scale of the mainframe on this bike is how small that Lyric looks. But obviously that was the biggest single crown fork available when Liteville were putting this spec together. You can, you know, now obviously get a RockShox Zeb, and I have to say, if I was building up a custom build around this frame, that's the fork I'd go for. I mean, you know, the Lyric does really, really well up front, but just visually, and I think from having the extra stiffness of those 38mm stanchions, Zeb is probably the way I go, because, you know, you're not trying to save the weight on this beast anyway. But you've still got, you know, Charger 2 damper, debonair spring, you know, and it's worked really, really well, to be fair. And then coming up to the handlebar, we've got more Syntace goodness. We've got a sort of ergon style grip there. You've got super light vector carbon bars, and these stems are absolutely superb, these Syntace stems. Cold forged and then just really smoothly machined. Super stiff, you know, massive fan of this stem. But only comes in 31.8, so you can't get in a 35, which is a bit of a shame, but it works beautifully with this vector bar anyway. And just little, you know, little details like that. That's not a suspension system or anything like that. It's just a really nice sort of little tapered ring set of spacers in there. You know, the whole detailing is nice. And obviously I haven't even mentioned this is the bolt-on, it just, you know, fits there with these really nice machine dials, and again you've got that machine cradle dial there, and that's a holder for your phone. So if you want to use DPS or you want to have a full Strava update, you can have that running while you're riding. I mean, and I've used it with a phone, and it's absolutely rock solid. I just didn't use it for the live rider video because I thought it would get in the way of the footage, to be honest, and I'd get more questions about that than I would about the bike, and didn't want that. And then here's the controller for the Shimano Steps motor. Standard Steps head unit there with your 3 modes, your eco, your trail and your boost. And obviously that can all be tuned further in the Shimano Steps setup. And while we're on the subject of the battery, that's hidden under this plate here inside the down tube. Again, you've got this really nice dial holding it in place. You do have to make sure that's done up tight. We have had some situations where I've been riding it has rattled loose and it's kept cutting out, so you do need to keep that cranked up pretty hard. But again, it's just a really nice detail holding it all together there. And you know, again, you've got this carbon fibre Liteville logo on this bright red belly plate there. And another thing, massively important, this is actually an optional upgrade, but I would very strongly suggest you get this, is this big bash plate that runs around in front of the Shimano motor, protecting it there, because it does not take a lot to belly this bike out, because it is super low, really low, which is interesting, because the old Liteville road really struggled with having a too high bottom bracket, and they've kind of flipped around the other way. And you're also getting extra cooling fins built into what the Liteville call a cylinder head for the Shimano Steps motor. So as you can see, this is taking some hammer on here, and there's been some hammer on the crank ends as well. But yeah, I'll talk about the geometry in a minute. While I'm down here, you know, this is you know, you've got the bolt plate, you've got the bash plate there, you've got this chain protector there to stop all the grime coming off that big rear tyre and getting onto the chain. Like I said, talked about the rear mech protector there. And this isn't the fuel tank. Well, it kind of is. This is the where you plug the battery charger in. This will actually change on the Pro model, which is coming up shortly, because Liteville have realised that, to be fair, that's a pretty daft place to have your battery connector there. I mean, they've protected it as best they can with a really nice metal screw top there, really well sealed, but it does get absolutely buried in filth on muddy rides. So that's something they're rethinking for the Pro model. Now, while we're up here, you can see we've got another bolt-on detail there to stop the forks coming round too far and risking damage that way. And then here you've got an air duct to keep the battery cool, as well as there is extra fins on the Shimano motor. So there's tons of detailing gone into this bike. Oh, and one thing I haven't touched upon yet is the 8-pins dropper post. As you can see, this is not a conventional dropper post. It's actually built into the frame. It's an independent company, but the whole shaft of the post is kind of built into the frame, and you can adjust it in terms of reach anywhere up to 220 mil just by unlocking that little adjuster at the top there and then manually setting it yourself. And then you've got this SQ Lab saddle on top. Really, you know, it's quite strange shape, quite a broad sort of armchair saddle, but super comfortable, even if you're not bothering to wear pads, if you're just running in your baggies and your boxes. Super comfortable. But this massive shaft on this 8-pin seat post, there's still a bit of wobble on it, but really smooth action, really clean setup, and it's operated by a bike yoke trigger up there, which is one of my favourite dropper post triggers. So in terms of spec, you know, this is all good. And then obviously, you know, it doesn't matter how beautifully built the bike is if the geometry's out of whack, but Liteville have got that properly dialed as well. So you've got, this is a large, and it's got a 64.5 degree head angle, 74.5 degree seat angle. I mean, obviously that's not super steep, so you do need to slide forwards on that SQ Lab saddle to keep the nose down in certain situations. Certainly if you're running in boost, because it does tend to fly the front wheel up out of corners. You'll see that on the Live Rider video. It's a 442mm rear chainstay, so, you know, pretty impressively short in the mullet setup, even though you've still got clearance there for a 2.8 inch tyre. It's a pretty tight back end with really good responsiveness. It's a 4-bar rear suspension setup, as you can see, but you have got this big chopper linkage up the top there, so it doesn't look conventional, but it does operate in a conventional kind of Specialized and a whole load of other brands ways. Very, very neutral pedaling feel, like I say, so you can just keep the power down whatever that back wheel is going over, especially with all that pneumatic protection from that massive rear tyre. And in terms of length, wheelbase is 1250, and you've got a 470mm reach, and it's a 42mm offset, so short offset lyric fork up front there. And if I haven't mentioned it already, 170mm travel on the front and 160mm travel on the front. So as well as being mullet, you've got a slight discrepancy in the travel, but to be fair, with a coil on the back, you need that extra 10mm of travel on the front. You might even, you know, I'd even think you could even go up to a 180mm without disturbing things too much if you're putting this together as a custom package. But the one thing that really stands out, for better and worse, let's be honest, is the bottom bracket height. I mean, this is a 330mm bottom bracket height off the floor. That is crazy. I mean, that's low for a bike with like 120mm of travel, let alone 160mm travel. So as you can see, that does have a knock-on effect literally on the cranks and on that bash plate. That has taken some hammer, especially around rocky areas like this at Stainburn. And if you are riding a lot of steppy, rocky stuff and you don't like grinding out the pedals, or you're riding a lot of rutty stuff where pedal clearance can be a problem, this isn't the bike for you. However, the upside of that is it's incredibly planted and anchored through turns. This thing, I mean, in terms of getting your bar over, this thing is an absolute maniac. It's a proper hooligan when it comes to throwing itself flat on the floor. And because it's not massively long, I mean, 470 is a decent length, and because it's got that short offset fork and a relatively short stem, it's really, really agile up front to like flick the bike from side to side to side. Nothing like a conventional sort of, even though the battery isn't specifically low in the frame, the whole center of gravity of the bike is very, very low, so it loves getting itself leant over. So that's the tech details on this bike. I mean, it's certainly been a fascinating and absolutely blisteringly fast and enjoyable bike to ride. So hopefully it's been an enjoyable bike to check in on the details of. But there's a whole load of other stuff which I haven't really gone into here, like, you know, the cable clips under the battery and everything, even inside, you know. They've just gone to far more detail than usual in terms of the detailing, but that's always been Liteville's reputation. I mean, the conventionally powered 301 is now in its Mark 15 version, so it's such an evolved setup. But for a first e-bike and a first carbon frame bike, this is absolutely outstanding. And with the Pro model, with the changes in the battery cap placement, that's going to, you know, twist it up an even further notch. So thanks very much indeed to Liteville for lending me this demo bike. Thanks to you guys for watching this. If you've not subscribed already, please subscribe and click the notifications button so you know when my next video comes up. Make sure you watch the live ride review, because that's kind of the main, because that's when this bike will obviously come really, really alive on the trails here at Stainburn. I mean, I've ridden it all over, but I've just filmed it at Stainburn because it's an absolute beast round here, to be honest. Thanks very much to Sumi, to Specialized, to Endura, to Can't Quit, to Specialized, to Giro and Camelbak, and Red Bull Spect for the equipment I've been using. Thanks to Crud for the XL fender, for keeping the lens clean, and I've been on DMR pedals today. And massive thanks to my Patreon supporters, whose names are scrolling up here and who contribute on a monthly basis towards the time I spend making these unsponsored videos. So massive thanks to those guys. It's a very, very small monthly donation, and if you join them, you get extended, early and behind the scenes edits and some other perks. So please consider doing that. But for now, I've been Guy Kestevan on Guy Kest TV, talking about Liteville's absolutely beautifully built but complete beast of an EMTB, the 301 CE Mark 1.